It's my pleasure to. I was a little disappointed that Nick didn't send me a bio or something on this speaker, but fortunately, um, I've known him most of my life, and I've certainly known him all of his life. It's my brother, Scott Maitland. Scott went to West Point and graduated there in 1988. He served in the first Gulf War, where he served bravely and earned the Bronze Star. He After that, was recruited to the University of North Carolina Law School on a full ride scholarship. He clerked for two major law firms in Charlotte. And then you imagine with his background, he had several lucrative opportunities, but instead decided that he wanted to create a local restaurant in Chapel Hill. He wanted to adopt Chapel Hill as his home. And because of him, his brother came to law school here, and his mother now lives here. And you guys have been stuck with the Maitland family for almost 3 decades. So you blame him, don't blame me. Um, when Scott started Top of the Hill, not many people realize that this September will be the 25th anniversary of Top of the Hill. When he started Top of the Hill, Scott's been so far ahead of so many trends. When he started Top of the Hill, I believe it was the ninth microbrewery in the United States. I mean, back then you had to explain what a microbrewery was. Scott was 10 years ahead of Facebook, and he named the restaurant, or called it, branded it, the social crossroads of Chapel Hill. And that certainly has been a place where everyone in our community, as you can see in the picture behind me, I mean, it's been such an important part of so many things in this community, not just on major events and national championships, but it's been where I'm assuming everyone on this call has been there at least once. And even if it wasn't our family's restaurant, I always bring new people to town there, because I think it's just a great place to really see Chapel Hill for what it is. And Scott, when he started the restaurant, he raised that money in dribs and drabs, kind of like what we would call GoFundMe now. He was way ahead of the whole local food, local restaurant concept. They call food to fork now and all that. Scott was way ahead of that. There's no charity in this town, no charitable group that hasn't in some way or another been supported by my brother through Top of the Hill. He has created something there that has sat perfectly on our little city on the hill, so perfectly that most people just think it's always been there, and it hasn't. You guys don't know how close it was that TGIF's or Applebee's was sitting up there for the last 25 years. And this guy here made it happen, that it was a local restaurant that generations of graduates from Chapel Hill have just, always thought was there and is always going to be there. And Scott can speak to how tough the last 18 months has been for all restaurants in our area. And so we can't take that for granted anymore. I've just got to tell you that I can't be prouder of my brother for what he's done with Top of the Hill, and for me and our family and all of us. We have had so many great contributors to this town, but I find it really hard to imagine one person who has done more to manage the very heart and essence of the center of our town than my brother, Scott Maitland. Scott, welcome.
Wow. Well, thank
Welcome,
you,
Scott.
It's good I didn't send a bio, because that's going to be a tough thing to follow. But I will say that a lot of the people that I imagine that have done more than I have are in this Zoom call right here. And it is just a pleasure. Some people were surprised to find out that I used to be a member of this club. And so I know there's a lot of new folks, but for me, this is sort of feeling like coming home. I appreciate seeing a lot of faces I haven't seen in a long time. So that's really good to see. Rob, thank you very much for that. I am COVID has forced me to reconsider what my life work was and what's happened. And yeah, I think that I'm kind of overwhelmed at this idea that I had about making beer. And by the way, we were the fifth brewery in North Carolina. We were the fifth brewery in North Carolina, but would have been the third, but I had to spend 2 years to make money. So or to raise the money. But this idea that I had to make sure that TGI Fridays didn't dominate downtown Chapel Hill. And I thought, I'll sell some burgers and sell some beer and have some fun. And it's turned into 25 years now. At one point, pre-COVID, we had 150 people working for us. We're 22,000 square feet at the restaurant and brewery. And then of course we had the spinoff. I'm sitting in my office down at the distillery. And so we were the fifth distiller in North Carolina. Would have been the first distiller, but the town of Chapel Hill delayed us for 4 years in terms of getting the permits to build the distillery. Pioneered the organic wheat market in the state of North Carolina in terms of, and was the first locally sourced organic distillery in the South. And so it's been a lot of fun. And I'm hoping that this is going to be a conversation as opposed to me just talking, because boy, there's a lot of things to talk about, a lot of cool things happening. It has been a disastrous year, obviously, for the restaurant and hospitality business. Not only do I experience that through my own business, but I sit on the board of the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association, so I get to see that macro perspective too. And so the good news that I'm sure you heard, or maybe you haven't, but starting tonight, the governor has relaxed some of the restrictions that was placed on hospitality. And so bars can open up tonight, just straight out bars. Although in the perplexing Byzantine regulations of North Carolina, there is no such thing as bars. It's kind of weird. We tried to get that passed in 19, that there would just be a designation for bars, but everyone colloquially calls them bars. So bars can open up at 30% now. And we can sell alcohol until 11. We're still, restaurants are still limited to 50% of their capacity. And I think to start things off, I think the issue for Top of the Hill, and I think at least the 100 block of downtown Chapel Hill, obviously the 50% restrictions are difficult when you're talking about a busy time, but the real issue has been how the university has not been fully in action. I always have known this. Top of the Hill was always seen as we are the front porch of the University of North Carolina. The Carolina Inn is the living room. We're the front porch. And we are so dependent upon the university for our business. Was always very clear to me that we were. But honestly, I don't even think I understood the full extent of the symbiotic relationship between the businesses, especially on the 100 block of Franklin Street, and the university until this past year, as we've seen the university shut down early at Thanksgiving, et cetera, and fully not even be fully reopened in terms of the normal traffic it brings through all of the sporting events and all of that. So in the industry, people talk about, man, I'm having a hard time, I'm down 30%. Top of the Hill is down 82% over 2019. So it's been a challenge to keep our core together. And but the good news is that it looks like COVID is on the retreat, and that hopefully we can start, as this warmer weather comes, COVID's going away, and we're going to be able to start operating with some kind of sense of normalcy. But with that as the backdrop, I'm just curious, what is it that you guys want to talk about? I mean, we've got some interesting challenges downtown. We've got some interesting innovation things happening downtown. And we've got a lot of things happening just in our town in general that I think that as restaurateurs, we got an interesting view of. So does anybody have anything that they'd like to talk about? Otherwise, my favorite topic is me. I can talk about me all day long. No problem at all.
I hear enough about you all the time from you, but Scott, I'm going to throw you one that I just think will get some questions going. you know, you've been there for 25 years, but we've seen a lot of iconic spots like Spanky's and, um, uh, there's a lot of places that we always thought were going to always be there. And
Peppers.
Peppers,
Yep.
yeah, so many. And, so what, and that was pre-COVID. So, what is it do you think has made Top of the Hill such a stalwart place? And also, what's the key to some of the businesses that you think will be there long term, like, IP3s and things like that? How come some are succeeding, some aren't, that kind of stuff?
Well, if I knew, I would definitely take advantage of that, right? I think that there's a lot of things going on. Downtown Chapel Hill was struggling, and one of the things that kind of is fascinating to me that honestly boggles my mind is the rent prices on Franklin Street maintaining their levels, despite the fact that foot traffic on Franklin Street has dropped tremendously. And for those of you that have got the broader perspective, I've been on Franklin Street every day now for really 27 years. A lot of people remember South Point Mall opening up and thinking that South Point Mall was going to be sort of the death knell for Franklin Street. Well, I don't think that necessarily helped. I don't think that was the issue. To me, I think the issue has been an interesting dynamic where the capital stock on Franklin Street was able to retain its value despite the fact that it was kind of run down and access and infrastructure wasn't updated. And to me, what really hurt downtown was the opening of Meadowmount Exchange. And with the opening of Meadowmount Exchange, stalwart downtown businesses like Blackman and Sloop left, right? And I'm sure that we talked to Bill, there's all kinds of, I think I have a good sense and I understand why Bill would leave. But I've often said when it came to policy discussions about how we should be developing downtown, that instead of focusing on getting people to live downtown, we need to focus on people working downtown, because the lack of white collar workers downtown really hurts your breakfast business, whether that's at Sutton's or, the old waffle shop has gone away. And that's another thing that was around 55 years. So that office worker downtown comes and gets breakfast, has lunch, comes in, has an after dinner drink, maybe stays and has dinner. Then they leave, and the parking infrastructure that they were utilizing is then open for the folks that are coming for downtown in the evening. So I think that in addition to Meadowmount Exchange or downtown not necessarily being a home to a lot of white collar workers anymore, we also saw the university itself really start to provide lots of services. Jim Hevner and I have had discussions over the years about whether or not the university is violating the Umstead Act. And the reality is people don't even know what that is. But there's the idea that there is a law saying that the university should not be able to provide services that the local town should be able to provide. And I'm sure not here to throw stones or anything at the university. It's fine. I'm just saying that the university intentionally and for good reason realigned its orientation from east-west to north-south and connected the Dean Dome with some really neat architectural workings over the last 15 years. And then they created the whole center of student life really migrated towards more of the Dean Dome. So getting up to Franklin Street is not nearly as easy as it was for people back in the mid-90s. Nor is it as compelling to come because you have lots of food services and things available on campus. So despite all of that, the rent on Franklin Street stayed the same when in fact the foot traffic has dropped a lot. So I think, Rob, going back to your question, what makes a successful thing? I think I know what makes an unsuccessful thing. An unsuccessful thing is thinking that there's just going to be foot traffic that you're going to be able to grab and build a business on, and not really figuring out how you're going to get actually people to come. And I think the Top of the Hill addressed that by really focusing on what we think our true core constituency is, and that's visitors. And you yourself even said it, that if somebody new comes to town, you bring them to Top of the Hill to show them downtown. And so, I realized pretty early that people that live in our town don't necessarily come downtown as much as you would think. They do when they're bringing visitors. And then of course we got the visitors that are coming to visit the university itself. And that's where we make our money. That's our customer base. And thinking that you're going to make a living off of college students wanting some sandwiches or something, I think that's going to be pretty difficult. Jim, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, Scott, congratulations on surviving. I think everyone here would say that if you took away, and I've now got you said 84%, 86% of your business went away.
84%, yeah.
84%, trying to figure out how to survive on 60 for over. Now it's what we're a year into this now. How have you done it?
Well, I remember the day, so Cooper announced the shutdown on the 17th, I believe, of March. Might have been the 16th, whatever it was, at like 3 o'clock. I had called a staff meeting at noon. I got all 150 people together and I laid them all off. And I remember people saying that, obviously that was a traumatic event. And people thought that maybe I was overreacting, but it was very clear to me that this wasn't going to be a 3-week thing. And then when we talk about that PPP money, I realized very quickly, based on the rules in terms of how to get reimbursed for that money, that by definition, the restaurant wasn't going to be able to check off the requirements to get reimbursed. So I immediately just looked at it as a low interest loan. And good news for us is that they've tinkered with the repayment eligibility stuff to help restaurants a little bit. So maybe that will change. But it was very clear to me that I needed to just keep my core available. And so the distillery, which has always been sort of an economic drag, actually became the lifeboat for the restaurant. We took advantage of the fact that we could do a drive-by curbside pickup of liquor, beer, and food. And so throughout the late spring and summer, we had 6 of our tenured managers here, all of whom have been with Top of the Hill over 12 years. And we just worked this little store. And then obviously, if you remember, we had the hand sanitizer deal go on, and that's a whole nother chapter. But to show you how crazy the ABC system is, I made a hell of a lot more money selling hand sanitizer when I was giving 50% of what I made away for free than I did selling booze to the ABC system, right? And so we were able to create this lifeline. When I was in the Army, when I was at West Point, we learned about Mahan's expandable Army concept. And the early sergeant major of the Army realized that there was no use to just training 1,000 guys that could fight. And so what he did instead was he trained 1,000 people that could teach people to fight. And when the Army needed to expand, then he had trainers ready to go so we could train tens of thousands of soldiers quickly. And that's what I tried to do with Top of the Hill, was keep the core management team alive. And then hopefully we'd be able to reignite and re-expand as needed. And we reopened, we closed on, I guess it was the 16th or 17th of March. Did a bunch of other things, like I said, through that spring and summer, but reopened the restaurant back in August. And the only way we've survived is we got PPP money. We did a round 2 of Founders Club. So we raised $250,000 on Founders Club. That's a fascinating story, both Founders Club 2 and the original Founders Club. And if you don't know what that was, when I first started Top of the Hill, the landlord, Joe Riddle, asked me to prove how Top of the Hill was going to be successful. He said, you got to prove to me Top of the Hill is going to be successful. And so I took him to restaurants in Atlanta and New York and all this stuff. And of course, that didn't prove it to him. So I came up with the idea of the Founders Club, which was the original, BOGO offer. Why am I spazzing? But what's the 2-for-1?
Buy one, get one.
Yeah, well, no, buy one. But what's the
BOGO.
Yeah, no, BOGO is the but there's the companies that did it. Like I don't, you know what I'm talking about? Where there was a big.
Are you thinking about GoFundMe?
No, I'm talking about. Gosh, I'm really having a senior moment. But the where you can buy coupons to go do things, right? You know, a discount.
Groupon.
Groupon. There we go. Coupons. There we go. So it was the original Groupon. And so what's really wild about this is that I said to people, all right, you give me between $100 and $1,000, and I will double your. I'm going to put the money into a trust, and I'm going to double your money. So if you give me $100, I'll give you $200 in food and beverage credit. And I ended up raising 75 grand that way back in 1995. That proved to Joe that we'd be successful. But we are 1 week away from opening when the state securities department, the North Carolina Department of Securities, came in and said I had violated securities law because I had sold interest in the restaurant to people to fund it. And it was ridiculous because I'm like, what are you talking about? It's not an interest in the restaurant. It's a $200 gift certificate. But we had to go to court, and every year for about 15 years, I would get calls from attorney friends of mine asking if I knew the Top of the Hill was being used as an example for what the definition of a security is, because that Top of the Hill case helped define what securities are for the state of North Carolina. And for you lawyers out there, we were also the very first LLC. I was in law school when LLCs were authorized in North Carolina. We were the very first LLC to do a registered offering in the state of North Carolina. So pretty crazy. Brian, you got a hand up.
Good to see you, Scott.
Hey, Brian, how are you doing, buddy?
We're doing all right, thank you. Gracious, what stories to tell? Echo Jim's comments. Staying alive has been a huge challenge here. A couple of things. One, the on-premise has obviously been a disaster, but what about off-premise and the ABC? It's interesting you talk about how difficult that is, but one reads about off-premise liquor sales have just really done well. Question.
Yeah, that's an interesting conundrum.
And then I got another question for you. So just remember that one, please. The future, you've been a huge, as Rob mentioned, benefactor and supporter and participate in the town, a participant. What do you see as the future of Franklin Street in 5 years' time and in 10 years' time? Those are the two questions.
Well, let's take the ABC thing first. What's unfortunate for micro distillers is that while alcohol sales have increased tremendously, those increases in sales have occurred among very large industrial brands. So, the big brands that are backed by the Diageos and all of that of the world, those are the ones that have really taken advantage of this trend. Micro distilleries, unfortunately, require restaurants and bars who are experimental and stuff to introduce the brands to people. And then also some boards and some stores within some boards are friendly to micro distillers. And by the way, Orange County ABC has been very good to us. But in general, it is very difficult to find North Carolina products in ABC stores in the 410 stores that exist across the state of North Carolina, which is totally counterintuitive. But for example, this summer, I went down to the beach and like in Kitty Hawk, and some friends had invited us to come. And my friend was like, this is great because there's an ABC store right at the entrance of the condo that we're staying at. We'll stop by and get some 8 Oak. And I told the guy, hey, don't hold your breath. I don't know if they're going to carry our whiskey. We go in there and I know how to navigate an ABC store, obviously. they are by law required to have a North Carolina section. That was one of the laws I was able to change. I walked around the whole store. I finally said, I'm sorry. You got to understand, this is the ABC store. I can't remember the name of the highway, but it is, just minutes away from Virginia in this huge tourist area. And I go up to the ABC counter guy and I say, I'm sorry, where's the North Carolina section? And he said, oh, it's behind here. And they had 5 North Carolina products behind the counter. There was no way for people to even see it and buy it. And the hostility that people have in the ABC system towards North Carolina distilleries just boggles my mind. And to the point where I truly have no other explanation for it other than there is chicanery afoot in terms of people getting paid off and this, that, and the other. Who knows? But flat out, straight out antagonism. And then, of course, I have had a lot of economic boycotts against my brand because I pioneered distilleries to have the right to sell directly to consumers when they visited distilleries. And you would have thought that this would have been the end of North Carolina as we knew it. Like according to the ABC system, this was going to destroy everybody. And, my point to them was, have you ever been in an ABC store? It's not like we have the retail store version of SWAT running ABC. It's not like it's, I'm like, if you think selling a bottle of liquor in a bottle to somebody who can't drink it on site and has to take it home is difficult, how about selling 1,500 cocktails to people that are 21 and 23 on a Friday night in downtown Chapel Hill? That's difficult. That's when you have to be careful about over serving and all of that. But people coming to buy a premium bottle of liquor at a distillery to drive to take it home, that's not a threat to public safety. And many people in North Carolina felt like I literally had a senator stand up on the floor and say that alcoholic mothers were going to line up at distilleries and buy products because of this new access, right? And I stood up and I said, well, I've never seen an alcoholic mother buy a $30 bottle of vodka. If you're that bad off, they're going to buy the cheap stuff. So there you go. So anyways, so that's what that is. The future of Chapel Hill, I think this is interesting. And one of the things that I think is interesting in terms of my own life, I remember being in the downtown commission meeting in 1996, into 96, and I think we were discussing the idea of hiring Chancellor Hooker. And if I'm not mistaken, Chancellor Hooker was hired in 97. Some of you might know this for a fact, but I think that's what we were in the process of hiring Chancellor Hooker. And I can't remember who said this, but somebody said, number one priority for us is we need to make sure that the Chancellor likes downtown Chapel Hill. And I thought that was really odd. I just remember thinking, oh, it hadn't occurred to me that a chancellor wouldn't like downtown Chapel Hill. And subsequent chancellors, that was never an issue. Obviously, Holden and James and all of these chancellors were just such an active part of our community in general, in the downtown community. And I can truly say that ever since I've been a student in 92, I would see the chancellor in the wild 2 to 3 times a week. Just on my basic walking around town, doing whatever. When it came time to hire Carol Folt, I was stunned to find out that we hired her and we didn't require her to live in Chapel Hill. And I don't know how many of you know this, but she would commute back almost every weekend. And what was wild was I was lobbying in Raleigh for distillery laws. And I would have lawmakers, this was during the big academic scandal and everything. And I would have lawmakers say, please take this message back to the chancellor. And I'm like, well, I don't see the chancellor around town. I assumed she was in Raleigh doing this. Nobody knew where she was. And I remember myself thinking of the gray-haired person in that meeting in 96 that said, we got to make sure the chancellor loves downtown. And then I realized, you know what? I'm no longer the young guy. I'm the gray-haired guy that should have said that when we were hiring Carol Folt. And so I'm saying this in public now. We cannot hire chancellors. We cannot hire town managers. We cannot hire these folks unless we require them to live in our town, right? So I feel like Carol kind of set back. I mean, I got no issues with Carol in general, but the lack of attention that she paid on our downtown, I think, hurt us. And then now I think the good news is I feel like the chessboard has changed. So the efforts to bring people to work in downtown. So for example, the Imagineering that went behind 140 Franklin Street, the first big high rise we have on Franklin Street. When they were discussing what that should be, I was arguing it needed to be office space with a little bit of residential. I was overruled. And the argument was that businesses did not want to locate in downtown Chapel Hill because the workforce housing was too far of a commute away from downtown Chapel Hill. And I think there was a lot of truth to that. And I think that that's why we saw Durham and Cary benefit from this growth over the last 10 to 15 years. But now I think the chessboard's completely changed. And I am trying in my own little way to get elected leaders to understand the opportunity that we have. The workforce housing that's being built in the triangle right now is actually along that 15501 corridor going down into Pittsburgh. So we are now perfectly positioned as a place that is easily to commute for workforce housing. Obviously, we've got great schools here. So if a business were to locate in downtown Chapel Hill or Carrboro, not only have we got a great school system and all of that, but we've got workforce housing easily available, easy commute. And I think that we need to really, really focus on that as we move forward, because I think that people working downtown is what makes a vibrant downtown.
I saw that John Garman had a question. John, you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. I was just wondering if you would share with us your brands of that you produce in your brewery.
Yeah.
And how far are you able to distribute, and what you would consider the most popular?
Yeah, well,
and the
so
most
actually,
unique?
so behind me, you see most of the things that we make. I think everything that we make is unique. One of the big issues we have in this industry is that it's all marketed as being handmade, when in fact 80 to 85% of all distilleries do not make their own alcohol. They buy it from somebody else. So we actually make it from scratch. We were the first locally sourced organic distillery in the South. And what do I mean by that? We only use ingredients that come within 100 miles of us. And again, we were the first organic distillery in the South.
Sure.
We've got, if you can see my backdrop here, starting on the left, we've got in the green label our Piedmont gin, our vodka, our reserve, our 8 oak whiskey, our spiced rum. And then we make this product right here for Zach Galifianakis, the actor. He's from Wilkesboro, North Wilkesboro, but his family is Greek. And so we made a Rocky Amello for him. And in Greece, a Rocky Amello is a grape-based spirit that's flavored with honey and spices. And so we were able to use organic grapes from the North Wilkesboro area and make this Rocky Amello.
Okay.
And wildly, and what I don't have back here is a bottle of our moonshine, but our moonshine's become extremely popular in the Greek community because it tastes very much like Rocky, a very smooth Rocky, which is Rocky Mellow is the sweet version of Rocky.
Okay.
So that's what's going on there. In terms of popularity, in terms of just flat out sales, vodka and 8 oak whiskey are the two winners. Vodka is a huge category. Whiskey is a smaller category, but very hot. 8 oak is a $29 bottle of wheat whiskey. We are unique. And again, my brother was very kind in saying how far out in front I have been in many trends. Unfortunately, I feel like I've been on the bleeding edge.
The bleeding edge.
Yeah. And so I don't make bourbon. And people say, well, why don't you make bourbon? It's like, well, we got a gazillion bourbons. Why do we need another bourbon?
Yeah.
We make a wheat whiskey. Wheat whiskey is, in my mind, the best whiskey. People make a mistake thinking bourbon is the only American whiskey. It's not true. There's 6 of them. Prior to the Civil War, bourbon whiskey was considered rot gut because it's 51% corn or more. The biggest whiskey before the Civil War was rye. And then wheat whiskey was considered the high-end valuable stuff. And it had about 10 to 15% market share. Rye had about 60% market share. Bourbon had about 10 to 15% market share. Civil War hits. There is no medicine, right? We don't have medicine at this point. And the idea of surgery and stuff on the battlefield, the idea of sanitizing was just getting started. But if you were a progressive surgeon, you were using liquor to sanitize your equipment, clean out the wound, and anesthetize the patient. And so everybody was broke. The cheapest thing to make was bourbon. And so in the 4 years of the Civil War, bourbon went from 10% market share to 90% market share. And it stayed there ever since. But the reality is it's rough. It's difficult to drink. And wheat whiskey just makes a much better whiskey. So anyways, that's what we do. All of these have won gold medals in international competitions. At one point, we were distributed in 11 states and in Japan. And I also went to China to try to set up a distribution deal there. But we have retrenched, and now we're just in North Carolina. John Perry sent a question on the chat.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. He said, what's the unintended consequences of the hand sanitizer situation? What other lessons will I take forward after going through this as a business person? Well, I think both Brian and Jim mentioned the biggest lesson I learned. I think that if you, and honestly, I've learned this over the last decade. If you had asked me in 2008 or 2009 what the definition of success is, I would have talked about how much money did you make and all this stuff. Since basically 2010, which, like, to give you an idea, I literally said to myself in January of 20, I have finally recovered from the Great Recession. I'm finally getting back to where I was. And then, of course, COVID hits, right? But now I truly, over the last 10 years, I've decided that if you are open, you're successful. I mean, are you open for the next day? Then by God, you're doing great. And, and it's weird to feel, to recognize that you've got people that whose families are on your healthcare programs and all of that kind of stuff. So there is this thing that started off as this light, fun thing becomes a burden. I have 3 generations of people working in my restaurant and to feel families, feel this kinship with people, and be able to navigate all of this and make sure that everybody can handle it is good. Okay, can you speak some more about challenges with the legislature and how things are different from alcohol marketing in, say, California? Yeah, so it's not so much the legislature. I think the biggest thing is, I guess it is, depending on how you want to look at it, but the biggest issue I think we've got is we're a control state. And a lot of people think being a control state is very odd. It's not as odd as you think. There are 17 control states in the United States. What makes us very odd is that the state of, in all the other control states, the state owns the ABC stores. We don't do that. We grant monopolies, and we grant franchise monopolies to different counties and municipalities throughout North Carolina. And as a result, there is no real oversight of these boards. And I think any of us could agree, if we were setting up a retail sales system to maximize profit to the state, we wouldn't have 172 different management boards overseeing this effort. We'd probably have 1, 2, or maybe at the max 3, right? So it's a very, very inefficient system. The examples of problems and abuse with financial in the system is legion. One thing that blows my mind, we have a convicted felon that is the head of the ABC Commission. If you're unaware of that, that's an interesting, I don't understand how a convicted felon can be the head of the ABC commission, but he was pardoned, and so they say he's eligible. But that lack of ability to market our interior or our own state industry is difficult, and it's a shame. Whereas other control states, micro distilleries actually do quite well. With respect to marketing in general, the ABC system and the ALE have a remarkable ability to ignore the law and just command by fiat. Actually, myself, I was joined Mystic Distilling in Durham, and currently the ABC system operates under a temporary injunction in terms of the rules surrounding distilleries, because they just announced a bunch of distillery rules without going through the process. And we were able to successfully challenge that. And so, of course, with all of the humility and service that you would expect, the ABC just took all of the rules they tried to jam down our throat, and now they're going and said that they did it properly, and they didn't. We won in court. They're now just taking all of those same rules and trying to jam it through the rules process. So we're speaking to all of that. But the point is that in California, there are no infringements on First Amendment issues, whereas here in North Carolina, there's all kinds of restrictions and alleged restrictions. So, for example, it was in fact me coming up with a legal response to the ABC saying that distilleries couldn't mention restaurants in social media that led me to a strategy to destroy the ABC system. So my COVID side hustle is I started my own law firm. I currently have a constitutional challenge to Sunday restrictions on hunting. And that was a way for me to get some experience, because in a month or two, I plan on filing my lawsuit to declare the ABC system unconstitutional. And so that's going to be pretty interesting. All right. What about making downtown Chapel Hill into a pedestrian mall and rerouting? Would that be good or bad? You know, I'm not a big fan of the pedestrian mall concept. This has been kicked around ever since I've been involved in downtown. There are very, very few examples of successful pedestrian malls. I was very happy to support the change that we did in terms of widening the sidewalk and all of that stuff in downtown as an experiment. Personally, I feel like the experiment has failed. I feel like that what we learned was we should just let the restaurants put tables on the sidewalk. We don't necessarily need to narrow Franklin Street to do that. I don't think that those two things are incompatible. And so I personally think that when we see traffic counts that are only 30% of what they would be when we get back to normal, downtown's going to become even more snarled. And so I would like to see it go back. And I know that they're talking about reverting the 100 block back to normal, but I'm not so sure that it's necessary. I think we should just let Carolina Brewery have their tables on the sidewalk. I don't think we necessarily need to lose a lane of traffic. And the reason why I feel like pedestrian stuff doesn't work as well is that it's a great theory and concept, but we do have wide sidewalks and there's plenty of places to walk, but people don't walk nearly as much as you think. They just don't. So I personally think it would take a lot of vitality out. I would prefer to see us become a vibrant economic hub by having people work downtown.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. We're proud of what you have accomplished in our town, in this community, and I'm grateful for what you have done beyond your business to give back to the community and beyond. We're grateful for what you're doing here. So we wish you best of luck and continued recovery following what we'll hope to be brighter days in this as COVID starts to lessen. So we thank you so much for being with us today. We enjoyed spending time with you.
I want to give a shout out to everybody. Thank you for the folks that did buy lunch from us. And if you don't know, you can just go onto our website and order any food anytime, and automatically DoorDash will deliver it to you if you so choose. So, Any event.
Very cool. Well,
All right.
guys, thank you so much. We, folks, I appreciate you joining us as always. Look forward to seeing everyone again next week. And
Thank you,
again,
Scott.
I think, Alan Young requested the green team